behalf of the eventTIZ team of Alexander Innovation Zone, we would like to welcome you all to the fourth eventTIZ live story, where top experts, entrepreneurs and mentors from all over the world share their valuable knowledge. As we had promised before Christmas, we're happy to have with us today, live from Texas, Ms. CHRISTINE LERIOS, business and marketing consultant, who will give a short 15-minute talk on a very interesting topic, which is failing with integrity. CHRISTINE will discuss questions like what are the signs to look for when our business is heading towards failure, or how do we fail in a way that we can still preserve our reputation. Some bio info for CHRISTINE. CHRISTINE LERIOS is a startup veteran with more than 2 decades of experience running operations and marketing efforts for small businesses in the technology, healthcare, finance, and nonprofit sectors. She currently serves as a consultant, mentor, and occasional board member to a diverse portfolio of clients. And she holds a dual bachelor's degree in economics and human biology from Stanford University. As always, you are invited to write down your questions in the group chat room during the talk in order to address them later in the 10-minute Q&A session where Mr. Toli Lerios will also join us. So, CHRISTINE, the next 15 minutes are all yours. Let me unmute you. Okay.
Yes. I'm showing that host has disabled participant screen sharing. Do I need to turn it on so that I can share my slides?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So let's see. So can you turn on the screen sharing for me so that I can share slides? Sure. Let's see.
CHRISTINE, just a minute, please.
Of course, of course. It's in my calendar.
I think we're okay now.
Yes, let me go ahead and share. Perfect. Okay. All right, can everyone see everything?
Yes, it's perfect.
All right, wonderful, thank you. My husband just stole my phone, so I've lost my timer, but hopefully I can stay within 15 minutes today. So hello, and thank you for your interest in this topic. I usually have at least 30 minutes to talk about this, so today I'm going to move rather quickly through a condensed version of this talk. If you have interest, you can go back and read the slides in full. I've made both this version and a longer version available online on Slideshare, and certainly we can discuss further in Q&A. I do want to make 2 disclaimers before I start. One, that all research and examples I use are American because this is where I have the most familiarity. However, what I have to share is relevant to other countries and cultures. 2, I am not a legal, insurance, financial, or spiritual professional. This is just for educational purposes and does not replace your independent professional judgment. Now, as we begin, you may be wondering, when the point of doing business is profit and success, why are we even discussing failure? When I was younger, my mother made me take judo classes, which is a type of martial art. And the first thing you learn in judo, it's not how to grapple, it's not how to deflect a punch or how to break a chokehold. It's how to fall, ukemi. Because if you're going to take judo, you are going to fall a lot. And you need to learn how to prepare your body so that you can fall and use gravity and direct the energy of the fall away so that you avoid injury, but also very importantly, you avoid hurting your partner as well. And it's the same with business. All businesses involve risk, and if you're involved with risk, you will eventually encounter failure. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, this is even more important to keep in mind. I'm going to share with you some statistics. This is, of course, American data, as I mentioned before, but if you've been in business or business school for long enough, you will hear this very dire statistic that 9 out of 10 businesses will fail. Now, the research on this is actually a little bit less dire. It's close to 75%. 3 out of 4 venture-backed companies will never return cash to their investors. Also, there is data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics that breaks this out into years, which I find more nuanced and more interesting. Now, again, COVID-19 has certainly had an impact on these numbers, but the Bureau has been tracking employment numbers, not small business failures. So this is about as updated as I can provide you right now. Even so, in pre-COVID days, if you took a business's time horizon out to the 10-year mark, the likelihood of failure is still much more likely than not. So you need to learn how to prepare for that. And not just failing or falling any which way so that you hit the ground, you want to be prepared to fail well. And you need to do so in a way that you sustain the least amount of damage so that you can get back up again. Now, if it's not already apparent, I just want to start with the message that failure is okay. For some of you, maybe this concept alone is revolutionary, but it is well known that Silicon Valley and similar business ecosystems are extremely tolerant of failure. You can find a lot of sources out there that are going to back me up on this. What we talk about less, however, is how to fail, and most importantly to me, how to fail with integrity. Now, what do I mean by that? Failing with integrity is failing in such a way that you minimize the amount of damage inflicted on everyone affiliated with your business, including yourself. That's it. If your goal in business is to provide value through your products or services, you don't want the parties involved with your business to be worse off from ever having worked with you, right? Now, that sounds like a simple concept, but let me tell you, if it were easy, there wouldn't be so many stories of companies and executives doing the opposite. I have plenty of examples telling about this, but of course, in the interest of time, I will share with you the most egregious one in recent years. Who here has not heard about Theranos? Theranos was a health technology company founded by Elizabeth Holmes. They claim to have developed innovative technologies and machines to do inexpensive blood testing on very small amounts of blood. At its peak in 2014, Theranos was valued at $10 billion, and they took in $700 million in investment. However, a few years later, this all came crashing down when the company was exposed as a fraud. The technology did not work. The Securities and Exchange Commission and criminal investigators swooped in, and by 2018, the company was finished. Failure, right? But more clearly, Theranos failed without integrity. Now, I can't go into the dirty details of everything just because of time, but between returning erroneous test results, failing to deliver to partners who invested millions in infrastructure and loans, creating a toxic corporate culture that led to bullying and the suicide of at least one employee, squandering $700 million that they raised, and taking actions that resulted in criminal charges, Theranos hurt everyone affiliated with them, their customers, partners, employees, investors, and certainly themselves. I'm going to quote here from Harvard business professor Shekhar Ghosh, who studies business failure and outlines where it is that failure becomes toxic. In a startup, if a company is doing well and a founder gets greedy and takes more than his or her, I'm adding, fair share, people sort of forgive him or her. But when a company is going down, when you protect your own interest, it's always at the cost of someone else. People don't forgive that. I want to make clear here the difference between enterprise failure and personal failure, because it's a key difference. Enterprise failure can be an asset, but personal failure is ruinous because your reputation means everything. If your business is failing due to faulty product, a bad market fit, or any other myriad of business reasons, you at least have the opportunity to learn from the experience and move on. That kind of failure is normal enough that investors and other parties can tolerate it. However, if you fail on a moral level, through fraud, through blatant dishonesty, through taking advantage of your customers, your investors, and your employees, Silicon Valley, and I'm certain Greece, is still a small enough community where you can poison your reputation. Honor is still a thing. I'm going to do another quote here. Ironically, A personal failure often occurs because an entrepreneur is trying too hard to avoid an enterprise failure. Trying to keep the venture capitalists happy and the bankruptcy at bay, the founder or CEO will resort to illegal acts such as fraud, or to morally problematic acts such as blatant misrepresentation of the company's capabilities or prospects when talking to customers or financiers. And when you do that, you're then on the slippery slope of taking an enterprise failure and making it a personal failure. Executives do that all the time because they do not distinguish between the two. So now that we've defined some things, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the ukemi in business, the art of breaking the fall. And the first part of this is inoculating yourself against failure, having certain structures and mechanisms in place so that you can protect yourself and those involved with your business should you fail. These may seem like obvious practicalities, but I've worked with enough entrepreneurs who are either unaware of them or don't prioritize them, so I'm just listing them here. Over these next slides, I am going to toggle back and forth so that you can see some Greek terms and translations for some of the concepts I'm going to discuss. And we're going to have to give a big evcharisto poli to my husband, Toli Lerios, for helping me with this part of the presentation. So first, you will want to protect yourself legally. There's a reason why I put that disclaimer at the start of my presentation. Start by making sure you have the correct legal structures and entities in place. The main reason for this is to protect individuals, founders, board members, employee, etc., from personal liability. Also, be very careful about loans and situations that require you to personally guarantee the loan. I was sad to discover that the Greek banking system does often require personal guarantees. So if your business reaches a certain size, it may be possible to tap outside resources, or rather resources outside the country that won't require the personal guarantee. Also, if there's patentable intellectual property in your business, make sure you protect that legally as well. Get a good patent lawyer, start your filings. This is a very worthwhile investment in the business, and I will discuss that later. Second, make sure your business is adequately insured. It will make your head spin just the number and different types of insurances that are available on the US market. I'm not familiar with the Greek insurance market, but I'm sure there are counterpoints to many of these insurances I have listed. Thirdly, hire a very good chief financial officer or financial manager and a strong accounting firm. If you're a large company in the US, or if you're not a large company, rather, in the US, you can hire what's called a virtual CFO that can do this for you part-time. Financials are a barometer of your company's health, and you need accurate and frequently updated financials so that you can make good decisions, forecasts, and predictions down the road. You may also need to maintain certain compliances. I'm not sure what you'll have to do inside Greece, but I'm sure that being part of the EU, there are certain financial compliance measures and standards that you will have to meet. Have a plan F, a plan in case of failure. Make it an option in your exit strategy and create a failure plan the way you would have something like an emergency exit in your building. I know you don't want to focus on this, but you do want to have a plan like this in place. Determine what failure would look like for your company. This is a very challenging thing to do, mostly because it's going to differ depending on your industry. But for example, a healthcare device will have a very different failure point than an app that would help you pick out a restaurant or choose a movie. Define the metrics and the key performance indicators that can signal oncoming failure. Again, this is where you want to have a really strong CFO. Now, of course, running out of money is a very clear signal of failing, but there are other ones as well. Growth numbers, sales revenues, and even the growth or actions of a key competitor can give you ideas of when the end might be coming for your business. Figure out what that exact threshold or tipping point is where you will have to concede failure and start closing down the business as opposed to just running it. Determine what the different options are to increase your runway for success or to soften the fall when failure comes. Business loans and lines of credit are certainly something that your CFO can have in place for you so that you can tap if necessary. But I really want to emphasize that if you're going to take a loan, you'll need to have a concrete plan to pay it back. Don't just use a loan to keep things running as usual in the delusional hope that a miracle will take place. You can also pivot your company. This is an overused buzzword, but it essentially means that the current plan isn't working, maintaining the company, but switching gears and shifting the focus of the business. For example, Twitter was born out of a failed podcasting platform. Netflix, if you're old enough to remember this, started out shipping DVDs direct to your home. And then lastly, there's acquisition. There are actually different flavors of acquisition. And ideally, people think of the case where they get a really high valuation and they get acquired at the top of their game, much like WhatsApp and Instagram were acquired by Facebook. However, there are lower valuation scenarios where if the best case acquisition isn't possible, you can look into these in order to prevent a complete shutdown of your company. You can do a divestiture where you sell part of a company. The company does not have to be sold in its entirety. It may be that only a specific product, a specific business division, or even access to certain customers will be valuable to an acquirer. So just sell that part of the company. There's also divestiture where you sell only the intellectual property. So if you listen to me like in the last couple of slides and you secured your intellectual property through patents, this has real value. And an acquirer may purchase that in order to use for themselves, license to others, or even just buy it to keep it out of the hands of competitors. And then there's the acqui-hire. This is when a company is acquired primarily for the talent of its employees. Really good talent is expensive and hard to find. And if you've assembled a team of rock stars that works well together and has proven itself by building a robust product, there are companies that will pay for that. And this is a scenario where it's very important to be good to your employees, because the value of your company will depend on their willingness to stay and transfer to the acquirer. Now, let's say you've done and tried everything I've listed. You've tried a bunch of things that I haven't listed, and you've come to realize that failure is unavoidable. What do? You fail fast, and you fail as early as possible. Denial is not a strategy here. Don't put any more effort or money in putting off the inevitable, because you will need enough time and money, in order to fail with integrity. Many failures of integrity, or failures without integrity, happen because executives prolong the inevitable to the point where there are no resources left to take care of everyone. Make sure you have enough funds to pay your suppliers, issue final paychecks to your employees. It sounds real obvious, but a lot of companies violate this, and even return anything that's left to your investors. Leave on good terms with as many parties as possible so that you can work with them again when you restart. Now, on that note, I want to close on a more positive message than the one I've been talking about. What if you're one of the few who fail to fail? Well, my message to you then is to succeed with integrity. This is so much more fun than talking about failing with integrity, but I will also tell you that there are a lot of companies that are terrible at this as well. And so I want to encourage you that if you meet with success, that you use that success to support your customers, support your partners, help your employees, and of course, provide a return to your investors. And in doing so, you will multiply your success. And as for yourself personally, if you are successful, please pay it forward. Charity is an obvious choice. You can be charitable both on a personal level and also at the level of your business in the form of free or heavily discounted products or services to students or nonprofits. Your company can even start its own foundation that's tied to its corporate mission. But my favorite, of course, is mentorship. For many successful people, time is far more valuable than money. And from what we've seen, there is a definite gulf between supply and demand for mentorship. I encourage you to mentor other entrepreneurs. Help them learn from your mistakes, help them compound their successes, help them think strategically and critically, and most importantly, help them fail and succeed with integrity. So that finishes it up. This is my LinkedIn connection, and this is the link to Slideshare. So you can certainly view this presentation slides and the longer version of this. And of course, we have a Q&A coming up if you have any questions.
Thank you, Christine, for the best practices you shared with us. I'm sure they are all very helpful. So we have the next 10 minutes for the Q&A session. We have some questions from the registration. Let me start with the first. And welcome, Toli. Hello. So the first question, what if the failures of one department in a company are not obvious to the general management and there is no quality assurance to detect the fails? Should individual employees alert the management or take any action?
Right. That is a really good question. So again, the whole point of having a plan F is to think about all of, is to imagine all the possible ways that a company can fail. But it's also good to have, and you'll want to have backup plans. So and I see another question here about what happens when failure is unexpected. Even if you can't see it coming, if you have a plan F in place, you at least have it there so that you can start putting things in place, so that you can start prioritizing, okay, this is only the amount of funds left. What comes first? Like, what are the first things that we'll have to pay off? What are the first things that we'll have to shut down? The longer form of my presentation actually goes into certain things to do, for example, like how to move customers off from your own platform towards another, like essentially giving your customers over to a competitor, which is unheard of, but it's a way to rescue your customers, even at the expense of yourself, so that you can maintain your reputation. So there are certain things that you can do and certain sort of worst case scenarios that you can have in place so that when the unexpected happens, you can implement this very quickly.
So it directly answers the specific question. It does happen sometimes that you have employees in a department who are seeing failure within their department, but they see their manager trying to cover their own ass, essentially not reporting to upper management what's going on in order to protect themselves. That does occur. And so what do you do in this case? It does make sense first to try to see whether the manager that you're working under is aware of more things than the employees is seeing. For example, sometimes the department is specifically trying to close down. It's not ready to share that with the employees, but it's intentionally taking a step back from its own success because the company is doing a pivot. So the failure of the department may be intentional, but the employees themselves are not aware of it. The manager is. So it could be a communication issue. So first, the first thing to do is, of course, try to see whether the manager can explain the reason for these failings within the department. But if the manager seems to be evasive and doesn't seem to be transparent about what's going on, then it does make sense to raise the issue further up. Because eventually transparency tends to be the best policy, but it has to be upper management that has to make the decision. So failure in the department doesn't necessarily mean failure of the business. But sometimes it does. So yes, it does make sense to alert higher management if the immediate management is not responsive.
And I'm just going to add really quickly here, it's a good idea to have a failure tolerant culture within the company as well, so that employees have the confidence to say, hey, something's going on, let me alert you to it, rather than trying to hide it. Because again, if you're not creating a failure tolerant culture in the company, you are seeding the seeds for failing without integrity in and of itself.
Okay, thank you. Let me proceed. I think it's from a woman. What skills are important for a woman in a lead position? I think regarding failure. That is the question.
That is an excellent question. And again, it's going to depend on the culture of the company. I do think that it is, I do think that honesty and transparency is important. And I think it is important to be able to show that as a woman, you can fail, that you can have a weak point, but that you can be stronger and bounce back from it. Because again, I'm trying to think of the saying, but usually the cover-up is worse than the crime, is what they say here. I don't know if there's a similar saying in Greece. And so again, if you create a company culture that is tolerant and supportive of men and women, of people of color, and give them the room to fail, to and serve as a role model and say, okay, this is where my weak points are, and this is how I'm addressing it, and this is how, as a company, I want us to be able to talk about these things, then I think that that's a way to be a role model and lead in that manner. But I will say that it is extremely challenging as a woman, because people are constantly pointing out your weaknesses and trying to, in the most egregious of cases, you know, even sabotage you or put you in a position where you are weak. So I do want to recognize that.
Yeah, women are in a tougher spot. I mean, they can often, their business failings can often be explained incorrectly as, oh, because she's a woman, or because she's paying too much attention to the kids, or whatever, and not recognize the fact that there are endemic problems in the business. So the women can easily be the scapegoats when failure occurs. I would say the Greek culture in general, because it is so unforgiving of failure, it makes it much harder to admit failure, which therefore means you don't have enough transparency, which means you don't have enough support to avoid failure. So there has to be a room to separate business failure from personal failure. And for women, really, the best approach is, again, transparency, is to essentially share the reasons why failure is occurring so that others can help, men or women can help, it doesn't matter, and also not blame the individual as and turn the entrepreneurial, the business failure into personal one.
Thank you. Another question from Elizabeth. How do you cultivate a failure culture within an organization?
So it is going to have to start at the top, where leaders of the organization will have to be, again, transparent and say, okay, this is where we have messed up and this is where we're cleaning up the problem. And I do want to recognize, so one of the people in on this call is a woman named Rhonda Cannon, and I hope that you all are still doing this in your organization. This is something that's very small, but it's just an example. And that is, in some organizations that I've worked with, there's something called a witness box. And that is a box where people can very anonymously bear witness to something that's happening in the company or the organization. And you want to put in something that's encouraging, and you want it to be positive. But a lot of the positive messaging also comes from recognizing that, hey, I witnessed this kindness happening, but also I witnessed this person have a problem, and then I witnessed other people coming to help them. And it's sort of calling out things that you see people doing around you, rather than just turning a blind eye, and recognizing both the good things and the points where your company can learn from something. And so, again, you have to do this very carefully to make sure it's a positive experience. But once you've gone through a few rounds of this, if you have a really good person that can help you shape the first sorts of like witnesses that come out and discuss them in a positive environment, this helps create transparency in the company where everyone feels like they have a voice.
The other aspect that is important is that fear comes hand in hand with innovation, in the sense that failure comes because you take risks, and risks are essential to be able to innovate. So by having a culture that punishes failure, you're telling everybody, don't take risks. That kills startups. Startups have to continually innovate. Even large companies have to innovate or die. So clearly, not penalizing failure is essential to success. And so the way that some companies do this is, first of all, emphasizing that risk is welcome. And whenever risk is taken and it works, you reward it. Whenever risk is taken and it doesn't work out, either you're silent about it, or you just console the individual, or you rally to help them and encourage and reward that rallying around the individual. For example, at Facebook, you must have seen on occasion that it goes down for 24 hours. I was there for a while when this would happen on almost monthly basis. And it would always be because somebody was trying to release some cool feature, and as a result, they just injected some bad piece of code that destroyed the whole site. None of these people were ever fired. On the contrary, everybody rallied around them to help them, and there was a culture of appreciation around that group effort to fix things. So these are some concrete techniques you can use from an engineering, but they can also happen in sales, marketing initiatives. Encouraging risk comes hand in hand with encouraging the willingness to fail, and the transparency that goes along with that.
And I'm guessing there are certainly, books and other things that are written about this, but there are mechanisms that you can introduce within the company where people can fail, but do so in a sort of risk-limited environment. So, for example, company hackathons where they try different things, or is it Google that had like, was it the 10%
Yeah,
where you can give 10% of your time to something, and it doesn't have to have some sort of end result that substantiates itself into company revenue, but it gives you, again, a place to try things and to fail or to not have a result that you want, in the hope that you'll innovate while doing these sorts of things.
And I think one last question. If you could name only one deadly strategic mistake that leads to failure, what would this be from your own experience?
From our own experience? Well, without naming names, I would definitely say when lack of transparency is involved. So when somebody at the top starts hiding information or starts sort of miscommunicating information so as either to preserve something or to manipulate the situation to go their way. Because once somebody gets the sense that you are withholding something or even lying to them, that starts corroding away at the trust that the company will have within the organization. So that there are actually two specific situations I can think of where this happened, where it just and in a way, it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That they're avoiding a situation, so they decide to lie about it or they decide to cover it up. But in doing so, they actually bring on the failure faster.
Yeah, the causes of business failure can be many. It can be the environment changes. It can be any sort of thing, like the market is not ready. It's not really easy to point out one. And if I were to point one, it would be too specific to the past. But the reason that the business failure turns into a personal failure is almost always the same, and it's insecurity. It is the individual in charge trying to fix the business failure in a manner that is just not right, and demonstrating a failing of character, which then becomes a personal failure, which then becomes something that taints them individually. So, and the source of that tends to be almost always insecurity. It's like being in a relationship and lying because you're trying to cover up whatever it is that makes you feel unworthy of your partner.
So, Christine and Toli, I think we have reached the end. We would like to thank you for your time and your valuable knowledge on a topic that concerns all of us during these difficult and challenging times. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. You are both more than invited to visit our sunny Thessaloniki, not today, it's rainy. And we hope to meet you in person in the near future.
Certainly, we'd love to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us. And while we still have an audience, I just want to share our t-shirts here because, yeah, here we go. There we go. So.
This will be another talk. Okay, so I would like to tell you all, don't miss our next eventTIZ on the 31st of March. We will have with us Nick Kaliagopoulos, who will talk for venture capital and other forms of financing. Until next time, stay all safe. Bye.